Tanks have been decently improved lately, and so have their ultimates. Since the launch of Overwatch 2, almost all of them have had some form of upgrade, but not every one of them has a straightforward, easy use. Let's get into the best ways to use every tank ultimate, the most optimal situations to use them in, and how to do so effectively. If you want to grind the meta or rank up on your favorite heroes, use the link in the description to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of courses and guides to help you improve faster and easier. Check it out and enjoy the video. First up is D.Va. Self-destruct has historically been more about getting a fresh, full HP mech than about the actual self-destruction. She's even gotten buffs to help with that specifically, like a slightly longer invincibility period when you leave the mech after it's been destroyed. The only problem with using the self-destruct to get back to full HP is that you can get killed in the 3 seconds before the mech detonates, but with a smaller chance of getting bursted as soon as you leave, it's definitely worth it. You just have to make sure that you stick to corners or doorways when you're forced down to low health. And of course, being near your supports also helps a lot. As for using the ultimate proactively to launch a bomb into the enemy team, it's pretty much only consistent in the overtime fights. Forcing everyone to hide is great zoning, but for only 3 seconds, you definitely want to net at least a kill or 2. And the best way to do that is when enemy players have to be on point. And you can make sure that it gets maximum value by placing it between the point and the enemy team, so they not only get damaged or killed when contesting, but their entire team also gets split in half. There are a few niche situations where the self-destruct is guaranteed to deal damage, like in Mauga's cage fight or against a sleeping target, so holding onto it for the perfect moment can seriously be worth it. Moving on to Doomfist. Meteor Strike is one of the more intuitive ultimates. You use it as part of your dive, and now that he heals while targeting the strike, you can pretty much always keep it going instead of ever being forced to leave. But the thing to keep in mind is when to drop. You get less healing when dropping it early, but it's more likely to catch enemies off guard and out of position if it immediately lands after you start it up. Consider the enemy team's formation to make your decision. Against a massive group of enemies stacked close, you can take your time. Landing in a full team of players with full health and bonus shields and slowing them all has crazy impact. And even if they split after you launch, it'll only make it easier to isolate a few players to then finish off with your super punch. Against just a few players in one part of the map with no help, it's best to drop it immediately to secure the kill, before they get supported. You can take a second to aim it, and it'll heal you up for just about 75 health. Combined with the additional 75 shields you get from every target hit, you'll definitely survive long enough to choose between committing for the kill or getting out ASAP. Moving on to Junker Queen. If you haven't already noticed, the recent buff to her rampage has made it much harder to cancel. The startup time was only reduced by a quarter of a second, but it's really noticeable. Unless you're against Orisa or Doomfist who can both dodge and block your ultimate, you can just rush down main for a team-wide anti-heal. The only problem is a protective Suzu from Kiriko. You can try and force it by hitting knives on squishy heroes, so they either die or get saved, but otherwise it's a bit tough to force on your own. But either way, Kiriko eventually has to use it, and Queen can last long enough for that to happen. Realistically, not even Sound Barrier completely counters Rampage. You still get healed from the damage you deal to overhealth, so when you hit multiple enemies, you can save your shot for later. Your massive bleed self-heal and a bonus speed and health boost afterwards extends your engage even longer and keeps up the pressure on the enemy team. So even if your targets survive, you're still a full health Junker Queen in the backline. Moving on to Mauga. Cage fight is pretty easy. As long as you respect enemy speed boosting abilities, you can always catch players, and you can go for a team-wide catch or just a single target. It depends on both teams. If it's an ultimate fight where one cage won't be enough, more players caught will set up your DPS for way more kills. Ultimates like Dragon Blade and Tectonic Shock go ham in the cage fight, and Deadeye especially is perfect for an easy team wipe. But with just cage available, you're better off looking for less players. You want quick kills with the hindering effect and heal blocking shield, especially in situations where the enemy team can match your brawl in the cage. Genji, Tracer, and Kiriko are easy kills when you can catch them. Another Mauga or an Orisa, not so much, especially when the Orisa can just walk out with Fortify. And speaking of Orisa, her ultimate is up next. Terra Surge is one of the easiest ultimates to deal with, since you just need mobility to escape, and the next hero Juno offers an entire new option to speed out of it for your whole team. It's not a great countering ultimate, but since Orisa is already a good option for preventing the enemy team from rushing through you onto your backline, you can use the ultimate in a similar way. Play slow with your spam, and when the rush starts coming through, you can use your spin and spear and then Terra Surge to completely negate the enemy push. Using it aggressively is always going to be difficult, but oftentimes, you'll be playing against a backline with zero mobility. If you pull them in, you'll be able to one-shot them just before they escape. There are ways to save them with defensive support abilities, but the ultimate is still really good for setting up kills when there's no mobility available. Next up is Ramattra. Because Annihilation refreshes your armor, it's commonly used right after starting your normal Nemesis form. It's really easy to use when fighting other brawly teams, since they have to stay in your area and you'll easily catch up to them unless they can shield you off and amp speed away. But after the latest punch damage buff, It's a much better ultimate for immediately rushing into the backline and one-shotting them. With the annihilation damage over time effect, you only need 3 punches to kill 250 HP heroes. You won't always be dealing the swarm damage instantly, but it's a crazy amount of pressure, especially when the punches can't be blocked by anything other than Genji's deflect and Orisa's spin. As an ultimate that has a long maximum duration, you want to get the full value, but it's also easy to get stuck at low health, forced to block. 30 damage per second is great when you're punching, but it's not nearly as effective when you're stuck on the defensive. Whenever you can rush it, go for it. You'll still want to start with your normal nemesis form so that your armor soaks the damage for the first punch, but as soon as you're in the fray, you can pop that ultimate for team-wide damage that drains the enemy team incredibly fast. Next up is Reinhardt. Earthshatter has gotten way better over time, and the latest thing to take advantage of is the range. You can go for full team knockdowns much easier, and it's definitely more worth it than the solo shatter. You'll have to wait for cooldowns to be forced, but with your shield enabling your DPS, it shouldn't be too hard to get the enemy shields out of the way. The most important thing to remember is to be patient. Jumping the gun is one of the only ways you can get blocked, and rushing in for the kills can also get your armor shredded by any enemies that dodged or blocked the stun. As long as you keep your health high while cleaning up your targets, you pretty much have zero chance of losing the fight. Even just one kill is good enough, and all you have to do is recharge your shield and then wipe them all out. On to Roadhog. Despite tank ultimates being so strong overall, they can also be pretty simple. But Roadhog is one of the best types of simplicity, an insanely high amount of raw damage and knockback. Every tank is weakened to whole hog in some way. Now that he can hook while channeling it, not even matrix abilities will keep you safe. But outside of just killing the tank, which still isn't reliable thanks to some very powerful support abilities, it's also a perfect counter to otherwise unstoppable ultimates, like Photon Barrier and Cage Fight. It's the ultimate counter ability. The knockback and high damage are just impossible to handle. It's not like most players use the ultimate proactively, but it's definitely best when intentionally used to match another ult with a higher potential. And with how much Roadhog heals himself, you can get it pretty often, so even if you're feeding a lot, you'll have a lot of chances to counter the ultimates that you've helped to build. Next up is Sigma. Gravitic Flux is definitely the most versatile ultimate. You can either start the fight with it or counter ultimates, and it's a potent combo of high burst damage and a mid-air stun. You can use it in pretty much any situation, so don't hesitate to use it once you have it. When you start the fight, you can flux after only a few abilities have been forced. It's not just the damage that's so threatening, but the high gravity and airlock effect keep your opponents in place for your team to push up on. And defensively, if you have control over the point, you can use your spam damage to force the enemy to ult first, and your flux can easily counter. Even if you don't directly counter the attacking ultimate, like a Kitsune Rush for example, you can delay the enemy team and force them to heal up. And if you have hit scans on your team, you can even kill your targets before they drop, reducing the chance that they get saved by support abilities when they land. Next, we have Winston's Primal Rage. It's by far the hardest ultimate to get value out of, even with the extra 200 health from the mid-season 11 patch. The best way to use it is to keep disrupting the enemy backline. With his bubble and mobility, Winston is already a top-notch hero for marking the enemy backline, but if they don't die, he eventually has to leave. With Primal, you can keep contesting them, and with good practice, you can even kill both supports easily. Primal is definitely a countering type ultimate, but if you do have to start with it, when there's no other ultimate to help you win, you don't want to rush. And you definitely don't want to jump into 5 players. Start off normally by setting up to bubble the supports, and then go for the Primal. Just keep in mind that the enemy team won't just let you go easily, so if your health does get low, you're ready to escape and go back in with another bubble as soon as your Primal ends. With only 2 tanks left, Wrecking Ball is up. Minefield is as flexible as Gravitic Flux, without as much of the guaranteed impact, but it works both for pushing in by dropping mines on the whole enemy team, or for countering a push on your own, by also dropping mines on the whole enemy team. For this ult, you'll want to be extra aware of what type of rotation the enemy team is doing, so your mines and slam come in at the right time. Ball doesn't frontline at all, so even defending teams have a reason to rush your supports. But if you stay ready to counter, you'll flip the teamfight massively in your favor. Minefield isn't easy to counter without a high value support ultimate, especially now that each mine has 60 health instead of 50. And now finally for Zarya. Graviton Surge has been pretty simple for a long time, so the most important thing to focus on is when to use it. Shields and matrix abilities are really rough to work around, so the first step is getting high enough energy to force those abilities yourself. And although it seems obvious that you want full ammo for your grav, don't hold off on using it while reloading. You may not be able to immediately follow up, but you're more likely to get a bigger grav when you're always ready to launch it when the enemy shields and matrix come down. Solo gravs are rough, especially against Lifeweaver, but if Cage Fight can isolate single targets, so can grav. Just make sure to check your team beforehand, so you're not pulling a risky move off on your own. Zarya's damage and energy buildup has gotten better over time, but not to the point where you can 100% kill players caught in your grav. Not all teammates are easy to coordinate, but Graviton Surge is the type of ultimate that everyone wants to follow up on. That's it for the best way to use every tank ultimate. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.